We've been reporting here all day and just a bit earlier as well. There's just no ease for the EU's economic plight as Spain's unemployment reaches record highs and Greece is failing on its deficit reduction obligations. It's a year after EU leaders agreed on a key deal aimed at bringing an end to the crisis. Let's discuss all of it now with William Engdahl, author of Gods of Money, now joining us live here on RT. Good to see you today. Thanks for joining us. A year ago, the EU leaders, they claimed a huge victory in the crisis as they agreed to slash the Greek debt and increase the firepower of the main bailout fund. Do tell us, how's it been? How's it going?
It's a catastrophe about to happen. All that the EU and the European Central Bank have done since 1 year ago is simply to buy time with cosmetic measures. But the core problem, I maintain, is not a sovereign debt problem, not the sovereign debt of Greece nor of Italy or other countries. The core problem has been from the beginning and remains a banking system, the major international banks in Europe that are de facto insolvent and being held afloat on life support from the ECB. So the bailout measures toward Greece have not done anything to help the Greek economy or stabilize Greece. They've gone to bail out the banks in France and elsewhere in the EU that are technically in insolvency because of their exposure to...
So, William, if indeed it's the banks, as you're saying, if it's the banks' fault while Athens continues to fail on its promises, then why is it being forgiven each time it fails to fulfill what it's promised?
Well, somehow it's... I can't imagine if you planned a scenario to get everything wrong in the way that the EU governments have done in the last 4 years of this crisis, or 3.5 years. But from the get-go, they have shied away from any resolute action on the banks involved in the dodgy lending in the first place during the financial bubble years. So those banks remain the source of the problem. There's no lending going on to the real economy, and that's what is the root cause of 25% unemployment in Spain and Greece and elsewhere across the EU. So the austerity that's being demanded by EU governments like Germany is having the effect, and the irony is this is what Brüning did in 1931 that paved the way for the Third Reich because of the unemployment across Germany. And Germany is enforcing that same policy on Greece, Spain, and other weaker southern European countries.
William, as you said a moment ago, you know, 25% unemployment in Spain, 1 in 4 people without a job. As you're saying that the banks are ultimately at fault, how will the government, for example, in Spain, deal with this if the only remedy it keeps using is painful austerity measures, including a reduction of jobs? What is the solution here, truly?
Oh, they can't deal with it. I think the solution is to do what Sweden did in '92. And that is create a bad bank, good bank situation where you take the insolvent banks, isolate them from the real economy, nationalize them. Yes, that's a dirty word, I know, in Washington, but that's the logic of capitalism. When a bank fails because of imprudent lending, you have to take resolute action and put them through a Chapter 11 process, isolate the bad real estate debts, and get on with lending to the real economy so that real jobs begin to be created again in Spain. The same thing in Greece. So austerity is never a long-term solution to a crisis of this scale, and the world has never seen a crisis of the financial scale that we're talking. Another problem is, right now, the IMF, you mentioned in your announcement, the IMF on Wednesday issued a review of the European banking situation. The banks in Europe are facing a potential $4 trillion deleveraging over the next few years of their balance sheets in order to meet the capital adequacy and other requirements that are being imposed on them for bank stability. And that deleveraging is creating a credit crunch such that there's no lending going on.
So the credit crunch, in effect, these austerity measures, in effect. William, for a moment, I'm low on time here. I'm sorry, but for a broader picture, the EU leaders regularly meet for summits, which result in solutions which they hail as historic. I don't know, some may be thinking they're high on their champagne and caviar. Are there any positive results of this decision-making strategy, or is it a case of the wrong people in the wrong jobs?
I think the latter is the case. I don't think anybody really making the crucial decisions has an historical perspective of what happened in the last 70, 80 years back during the 1930s in Europe. And that's very important to have a historical perspective, because the same errors are being repeated again and again. You have to isolate the dodgy credits of these banks that went on a speculation binge triggered back in the last decade by ultra low interest rates generated out of the U.S. Fed from Alan Greenspan and others. So until that problem of the banks is addressed, we're not going to see economic recovery. We're not going to see. So to treat it only as a sovereign debt crisis is grabbing the tail of the elephant and calling it a snake.
William Engdahl, author of Gods of Money, joining us live here on RT. Thank you.
Thank you.